or unsettling on occasion. But the parasha today is Vayeshev. Vayeshev means to dwell. It means to settle down. It means to have rest. And this is what Jacob was doing when he was getting old, as he matured, as the silver cord loosed. He started to have sons. He started to have his family put together. He was no longer toiling for his father-in-law Laban. He has his wives. He's got 12 sons that are very, very much grown up. They can take over the work. So he's deciding it's time to settle down, right? All of us get to the point in life where we decide, I've got to settle down. Worked hard, and I'm not there yet. I'm still in the heat of my working, but others of us have got to a point where we've decided that it's time to settle down. This word Vayeshev can be likened to, in the modern world today, to have similar meaning to retirement. At this point, it's almost as if Jacob was retiring. And it says here that in Genesis 37, verse 1, that Jacob dwelt in a land wherein his father was a stranger in the land of Canaan. So he came unto Canaan and he decided, I'm going to retire here. This is a good spot to settle down. It's a good spot to just let it all end. My sons are here. They're working hard. And he believed that this was a good spot to decide that he's going to just chill out. Here he's 108 years old, settling in the land of Canaan. I would guess that at the ripe age of 108 years old, it's time to settle down. The Bible says that he was 108 years old. The text also suggests that Jacob, who has experienced quite a journey in his life, if we sat back and reflected on everything that Jacob went through, we would see that this man did not have it easy. But he decided that it's time to begin to rest from his labor-intense life. There's an interesting contrast here, though, because Jacob is the son of Abraham and Isaac. He's got a great predestined gift, a reward of birthright, whereby comes great consequence and responsibility to be had for all of us. Thus, it's evident that based on the tremendous responsibility given to Jacob, that he was not just going to settle down and retire. God wouldn't have it. In fact, the truth is, something I've come to realize, that a life settled is truly not life at all. At least not life with a purpose. And Jacob's life had a purpose. So to settle down would be difficult, but there must be a shaking up in order to realize full potential of life and experience the power of the Spirit that's been given to us. Preachers around the world and rabbis around the world and the Bible even suggest that all of us have a purpose. And the fact that we breathe and awaken every morning to a new day bears witness to that very purpose. Whether or not we decide to recognize or discern that purpose that lays weight in our journey's path is not the point. But the point is that our purpose is in front of us and it's stifling at times. For that reason, we will experience a sense of unsettlement with life as we journey through our proper path. Life's not always settling. Our experiences don't always bring us encouragement. The question is, can you discern what the experience is? How can I take this path that I'm on, the journey that I'm on, look at all the different points in time, and create a message from God as a result of it. Many of us go through unsettling times. Many of us, the mere fact that nothing's going on in our life is unsettling. Some of us enjoy the fact that we have nothing going on in our lives. We've retired. The question is, a person with a purpose, can they truly retire? Can an individual with a purpose truly retire? And if the Bible and the Word of God suggest that we all have a purpose, can we truly retire? Should there not be events, the supernatural, miraculous things happening in our lives on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis? And the frequency of those events, I don't care. The point is that from today to some point in time, we're being led to an event, the next event, the next experience. Not an event that will describe us, that will define who we are, but the next event. Those with purpose are on a journey, not toward a destination. The destination is clear. The destination is the Mashiach will return, and once Olam Haba comes, then we've all made it there. But until the Mashiach returns, we're just on a journey. So life with a purpose is sometimes unsettled. And if you have an unsettlement in your spirit, I'd encourage you to say that that's normal. That's a normal feeling. That's not something out of the norm. If you have an insecurity about what's happening with your life, where you're at, where you're sitting, that's a normal feeling. I think everybody has that. Some of us ignore it. Some of us act like we're not really having it, right? Some of us want to look as though we're all put together and we're established individuals and we have no insecurities. The reality is that all of us have those insecurities. Am I really doing what God has called me to do? Jacob had a great calling. Jacob come to Canaan and he said to himself, I'm 108 years old, it's time to settle down. I'm done wandering. I've been a Hebrew for a long time. Let's settle down. But part of Jacob's job, interestingly, part of Jacob's job was to have children. And the children are the extension of his birthright. The children are the extension of his calling, of his purpose. So whatever would happen to those children would in fact happen to Jacob. So Jacob technically could not settle down. In today's life, we have this concept that, and it's not the generation today, not my dad's generation with us kids, I think, but I'd say my dad's generation with their fathers and their mothers was when you're 18, you're out of the house. Nowadays, it's more like, stay home. Don't get forced out. We were all forced out at 18, and it was very hard for us. And stay in the house as long as you can, and try to get yourself established and set before you leave. I mean, it's a completely different model now, and I see that a lot with guys that are my age that stayed with their parents until they got married, or whatever, and they were 26 when they moved out, and their parents wanted them to be established, so they took care of them. Back in the day, at my dad's age, my dad was 17, 18 years old out of his house on his own, working 3 jobs and married at 19. So, I mean, it was a completely different world. Here, it's almost the same way. I mean, you can't just kick your kid out of the roost. He's the extension of you. It's your birthright. Your children are your birthright. These are the sons of Israel. They're going to establish the covenant that God made with Abraham, these 12 sons. And as a result of that responsibility comes great purpose. The purpose is to be the foundations of what you and I have become. So it's not right for Jacob just to decide, okay, I've made it to Canaan, I'm going to settle down, I'm 108. It's not going to work. No sooner than we read verse 1, which begins to discuss Jacob's retirement, God shakes up his entire life. Verse 1, it says, and Jacob dwelled in the land of his father, where the land of his father, wherein his father was a stranger, the land of Canaan. And then, just after that, God shakes him up and takes his most beloved son, Joseph, at the hand of his other sons. I mean, imagine that. Now Jacob, who's deciding, I'm going to retire, I'm going to settle down, his sons plot to kill and destroy his favorite son. Which is coincidental that this didn't happen, or is it? That this didn't happen prior to Joseph sharing a dream about his own purpose, which was predicated on an experience in the supernatural while he was asleep. So God gave Joseph a dream. The dream that he gave Joseph was for his purpose. And I'll talk in a little bit about the difference between dreams when you're asleep and dreams like you and I, like we have in an encounter. Right? So like I think to myself, I have a dream that one day I could, be, this person or be like that person. I mean, that's a personal goal. That's not a dream. This dream that he had was a dream that came from God and was predicated on an experience that would come in the future. And the interesting thing about it is that Joseph didn't even really get it in its entirety. And neither did Jacob, but he needed to have that dream prior to his sons trying to take Joseph and kill him. Joseph had to have the dream, and he had to share it with his father and his mother and his brothers. He had to share it because it was all part of a larger purpose. But in the moment in time, they would never have recognized that it was part of a larger purpose. Think about it. I mean, if somebody right now plots to kill you right now, and then decides rather than kill you, they're going to put you in slavery, and then you're gone for 10 to 15 years, what purpose does that fulfill? That's a heinous crime against you. Right? That's a crime against you personally. Well, no one would have thought to themselves that this is an actual event that's going to be part of some larger scheme in the spiritual world that God's going to use to make everybody else saved. I mean, who would have thunk it? Nobody. So here in Genesis 37, we'll read verse 3. Now Israel loved Joseph, Israel, being Jacob's spiritual name. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, which is a problem, to be honest. You have to love your children equally. And Jacob failed at that. And it may be the product of the fact that he had multiple wives and he didn't love the wives equally. And as a result of not loving the wives equally, how can you love the children from those wives equally? I mean, that bodes well for going to one wife and leaving multiple wives. The children of Rachel, he's going to love them because they come from the one he loves the most, right? Think about it. It makes so much sense. But here he loved Joseph the most. And because he was the son of his old age, it says, he made him a coat of many colors. And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him. could not speak peaceably unto him. They were unsure of this guy. They had an insecurity in their heart because they wanted their father's affection. They wanted their father's love. They didn't hate Jacob, interestingly. They hated Joseph. But they didn't hate Jacob, so they figured, well, if we get rid of Joseph, then our father will love us. And it's kind of the concept they're going through. I mean, just think about the psychology of that. Joseph dreamed a dream, it says, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. And behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, he says, and lo, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood around about and made abeyance to my sheep. And his brothers said to him, shall thou indeed reign over us, or shall thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream and told it his brethren and said, behold, I have a dream to dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeyance to me. And he told it to his father and to his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said unto him, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow down ourselves to you, to the earth? And his brothers envied him. But his father observed the same. Joseph's dreams, which potentially brought him a sense of security and encouragement in life. Imagine, this was Joseph's dream. And he's told by his father his whole life that if you have dreams, if God provides you with a dream, that it's got meaning. And interestingly, you can read in here, and I even pointed out later, that Jacob and his brothers all had the ability to interpret dreams. Because they all understood the dream. So it was a family trait. Because, I'm in the field, I have a sheaf, they have a sheaf. My sheaf stays standing, their sheaves fall down. What does that mean? They immediately say, so you're going to reign over us? They interpret it correctly. So the sun and the moon and the stars, they fall down. So I'm your father and your mother, the sun and the moon. They immediately interpreted the father and the mother as the sun and the moon. They all interpret dreams, which is interesting. That it was similar, it was a family trait. But that trait, I will tell you, I believe that it comes with the responsibility of this people, with the birthright that was given to them. And that very trait that Jacob had to interpret dreams, as he knew and saw visions of angels descending and ascending, and he wrestled with an angel, and yada, 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 the whole story of how he came through. That same essence passed from him to his sons. That same essence, that same birthright would be used in the future by Joseph in order for God to use him mightily for the salvation of the people. It's interesting to see how God is working. We think that only Joseph interpreted dreams. No, I think it was a family birthright. But for him, this dream, it was probably like, oh, I'm awesome. This is awesome, guys. You are bowing to me. I don't know how or when or where, but my dream says, this is what happens. And for him, it's probably this sense of encouragement. But his dreams had to be unsettling to the minds and hearts of his family. And we soon come to realize from the passage that the peace and security that Joseph's dreams must have brought him shortly turned into confusion as he lived out his life in contradiction for the next 10 to 15 years as a result of his brothers selling him into slavery. These dreams that he had completely contradicted his life experience for a period of 10 to 15 years. And quite honestly, as he rose through the ranks, that 10 to 15 years to become Zephanath-Paneah, the chancellor of all of Egypt, right? Never once did he think to himself that this is for the purpose of saving my family. He never understood that they're bowing to me. He never got that. He never got that this path of escalation is ultimately fulfilling the vision that God gave me as a child. He could only experience suffering. I mean, the mental anguish this guy went through, the cognitive dissonance this dude experienced, had to be immense. Felt that he was something great, but lived as a slave. Even as a chancellor, I still believe he thought he was a slave. He was sold. He was sold to be who he became. And I'm sure the Pharaoh probably reminded him on multiple occasions that he was sold into slavery and then he was given his freedom. Don't forget who gave you your freedom. Imagine, I can tell you right now, just by living in the world and experiencing the world, that I can guarantee you that Pharaoh probably said to him, don't forget who gave you your freedom. But here he is, and the reality is that sometimes our dreams are simply contrary to our circumstances. Our purpose will contradict our circumstances in many ways. But before I address the differences in types of dreams, I want to point out that Jacob's response in verse 11 shows that he understood God revealed himself through dreams and visions, because the patriarchal blessing he received was a product of the vision that was given to his mother Rebekah. Rebekah was given a vision that the elder shall serve the younger. And he knew that his blessing, the patriarchal blessing that passed to him, was as a result of the vision that God gave to his mother, the word that God gave to his mother. So when Joseph shared this dream, Jacob understood that this dream was something to be pondered. And the Bible says that Jacob kept or observed the sayings of Joseph in mind. In the Hebrew, the word that would be translated here is shamar. Shamar literally means to guard. So Jacob guarded the sayings because of the repetitious nature of the dreams. There wasn't only one dream, there was two dreams. And in both dreams, the same thing was occurring. Someone was obeying Joseph. So Jacob, according to the Hebrew text, understands that there's something deeper here. So he guards the sayings, which suggest an authenticity of message or its thrust. So Jacob himself believed in the authenticity of the message, even though he said, should your mother and should I bow to you? I believe we should look at that not as a sarcasm, but as a aha. So your mother and I are going to bow to you? And then he ponders, how could this be? Lord, what are you up to? He already loved Joseph. He already saw that special spark. So he's pondering in his heart, what on earth could this mean for us? The message was clear to both the brothers and Joseph's father that the entire family would somehow come under future subjection to Joseph as a result of a divine authority. that was inherent for Joseph's future. This was something, taking a point in time and projecting it out into the future. What would result from today into the future, 10 to 15 years? What interest would accrue for that individual's life to ensure that he would be in the position required that we would all lay down our heads to him in our crowns? The fact that Jacob mused on the sayings reveals the intrinsic understanding that he had about this form of communication between God and man. He knew that God communicated this way. He himself was the product of this form of communication. Jacob had the ability to interpret dreams. So did their sons. And we see this in the passage. And based on their interpretation, they wondered what these dreams could mean for the entire family. The brothers, I think, believed it. It was very tangible for them to understand that they would have to bow to Joseph because they already saw their father Jacob crowning him as the heir. They knew that their father Jacob was not the firstborn son, so that their father Jacob did not require the blessing of the firstborn. And they saw their father Jacob blessing Joseph more than the others, giving him a coat of many colors, making him the prince of the household. So the process there was clear, and they said to themselves, well, we don't want to bow to this guy. Jacob's brothers scorned and hated him for his haughty approach to these dreams. And they said, we don't want anything to do with him. And in Genesis 37, verse 12, it's revealed that Joseph was not attending the sheep with the rest of his brothers in Shechem. What does that mean? That Joseph did not do the same work that his brothers did? Why would he not be attending the sheep as his brothers? Because he most likely was exempt from the labor that his brothers were required to maintain. His father didn't make him go into the fields and do the work that they had to do. He stayed back with Dad and learned. His dad probably told him stories and taught him things and informed him of God and spirituality. While the brothers were out in the field working and hunting and doing the job, he was back home at the feet of his father studying. Verse 13 reveals that Jacob, called by a spiritual name Israel, sent Joseph to inquire how the brothers were doing in the pasturing fields with the herds. And when the brothers saw Joseph approaching, they immediately conspired to kill him. And the result of their conspiracy led the brothers to sell Joseph to a tribe of Ishmaelite traders that were on their way to Egypt. Consequently, the road the brothers took to avoid their destinies, because they knew their destiny was that they would end up bowing to him. So they said, let's kill him so we don't have to bow to him. And then somebody had the common sense to say, let's not kill him. That's harsh. He's our family. Let's sell him to those Ishmaelite traders. They didn't realize that the divine purpose that was created and established by God was that, yes, he would be blessed. Yes, he would raise up. Oh, and by the way, yes, you will conspire to kill him. It's my purpose that you do that. Oh, and by the way, it just so happens that these Ishmaelite traders that are marching across the desert there, those guys I put there for a reason. Yes, it's my purpose that you sell him to them. And the reason that they sold him, they didn't realize they were selling him so that his purpose would be revealed. They thought they were selling him off and washing their hands of him. They didn't realize that all along, every single step of the way, everything that seemed to contradict Joseph's dream was in fact in line with his dream, because it was God's purpose. The road the brothers took to avoid their destinies jump-started the life that God forewarned them of through Joseph's dream. That's awesome. They thought they were going to avoid what was going to happen, but it jump-started exactly what God forewarned them of. That was the starting point of them bowing to him. And Joseph would now be in the care of God and would not be subject to the persecution of his brothers and likewise the counsel of his father. He would not have his father to tell him, Joseph, get your mind right. You're the young Joseph. You know, you got to think differently here. You're the younger brother. Act differently. But now his father would be God. Joseph was forced to be alone in a foreign land, subject to the rules of the wicked that expanded on the earth, only to rely on the God of his fathers, only to rely on the years that he spent listening to his dad at the feet of his father, learning about the God of Abraham, his grandfather, great-grandfather, and Isaac, his grandfather, learning about this God. He had the stories that he could hold on to, but he was completely annexed, completely exiled, and in a land all alone. In the end, when it came time for Joseph to reveal his identity to his brothers during the time of famine, we see one of the most important lessons found in the book of Reshit, in Genesis, and specifically in the Torah as a whole. We learn an important reality that living in the Spirit is recognizing God's hand in our daily lives and the experiences we encounter, which sometimes many of us forget because we only think in the carnal. We have an inability to think beyond the temporal. And so the idea here is that this message is that, look, all of these things are coming together for a greater purpose. Some of us take forever to figure out our purpose. And not everybody is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Don't get me wrong. I mean, some of us are just like Reuben or Gad. Tell me the great thing Gad did. Does anyone ever talk about Gad? He's the son of Jacob. What about Naphtali or Asher? We all like the name, right? But no one really talks about these guys. You talk about Joseph because he had an experience. And everybody wants that experience. But just because Joseph was to be the leader and the head, that doesn't mean that we're to be the leaders or the head, but that also doesn't mean that we don't have a birthright. Because Gad had a birthright. And if it wasn't for Gad teaching what his father taught him to his sons, the 12 tribes would be lost. Right now they are. The birthright was not completed. Understanding the purpose, understanding the birthright, understanding how it all fits into your life. That's the important message today. How do these experiences, this unsettling nature of the spirit world, resting with the physical, how does it work with me? Some of us are content with not seeing into the future of what we want. Some of us are content with just seeing today. Let's just live today. The Bible tells you to do that. It, in fact, tells you to do not worry. Let tomorrow worry about itself. It says not to think about tomorrow. It says, did God not clothe the fields with grass and feed the sparrows? But we do. We think about it and we say, well, what are we supposed to do? And we project out into the future and forecast what we are going to be or who we're going to do, what we're going to do. And then some of us who are already in the future and mature, we look back on our lives and say, what did I do? What have I done? Nothing. When all along you've done things, you just don't recognize them because you're unable to bring these experiences together and understand what you actually did affect. Because each of us have affected change in people. And like I've said in the past, the most important people to affect change in is our families. You raise your children grow up, they become assets to their children and their children's children. You need families, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, your relatives, all important people to make change in. We forget about them because those people, we know them, or they know us. But if you read the scriptures and you read this story about Jacob and Joseph, it's all about family. And it's all about the interaction of that family. And in Judaism, that's what it's all about. In the Torah, that's what it's about. It's about the family. But it's a very important lesson. This lesson of God working, regardless of our circumstances, God has His purpose, and we may not understand that purpose. But He has one. And hopefully, that purpose is good. I mean, there's times when I sit back and think, I have no idea why this happened or why I did this, but I hope, God, you did that for a reason. And maybe I'll never know what it is, but I'm going to hope that one day when I stand in front of you, you're going to tell me that this was the reason why we did this. And that's just the reality. But let's define dreams. Let's get back to defining dreams. And I believe there's two separate types of dreams that we need to define. I started touching on it earlier. There's those dreams that we have while we're sleeping, and those experienced in the conscious, in the conscious, that typically pave the way for our future endeavors. Martin Luther King had a dream. He didn't literally have a dream that while he was sleeping, he had a vision of something that would be for the future. That dream was, that everyone would live well and in harmony and together, and that, civil rights would happen, and we wouldn't be, causing each other, harm or issues. And that was a good dream. That was a vision about something that would happen to the future. But it wasn't something that he had while he was sleeping. But I recall a play that I saw once where the main characters or actors discussed dreams and making clear distinctions between reality and a dream, having expressed that dreams are contrary to reality. And I remember, there's many people in the world will call you a dreamer if you dream a lot. If you think you're going to win the lottery, or if you think you're going to get, remember Ed McMahon coming to your door, or knocking on your door and you would just sit there and dream, and you keep going to the gas station and spending $5 here and there because one day you're going to hit the jackpot, and it's a dream, right? And people call you a dreamer, right? And sometimes dreamers don't achieve in life because they're not doers. And you have to make a distinction between dreamers and doers, because doers have dreams as well. And so this play that I was watching was making that distinction between dreams and reality, and they were very much very cynical about dreaming. I'm not, but they were very cynical about dreaming, and they made the point that in a dream you can eat a tuna sandwich that is behind the refrigerator for 3 weeks, and in reality you'll be harmed. That makes sense? They made the point that in a dream we can fly and transport from one place to another. In reality, we have to take transportation, and it takes hours sometimes rather than instantaneous. The fact is that dreams can become whatever we will them to become. But reality does not allow will to pan out. Your will is not always what will happen. I literally wish I could fly like Superman. I dream that I can fly like Superman. No matter how hard I will that, I am not from Krypton. It won't happen. I mean, that's the point. I mean, that's understood. I get that. We do not always experience what we will for our lives, and the hope we create is hardly ever on our timeline, if at all. This is the unsettling nature. Because we read the Bible and we hear these great experiences that these characters went through and the patriarchs went through, and we assume that those very same experiences will fall upon us. And you're taught that. I was watching a preacher on YouTube the other day preaching about your extraordinary life. And it's a nice message. I mean, it was a good message, but the guy was very, very, dynamic, very ambitious, was screaming and yelling, getting everybody engaged, having them scream and shout and clap. And and he's talking about your extraordinary life and what is to be extraordinary life and the empowerment of God and what grace is and yada, yada. And he's teaching these people that they, they're leaving this room feeling as if they could jump off a building and survive. Because you have the power of Christ within you. Well, dude, that's not reality. It feels good to think that way, but you will jump off that building and literally die. That's the reality. And the guy will sit there and tell you, no, if you believe that God will protect you, you will not die. Dude, Satan told Jesus to jump off the pinnacle, and Jesus looked at him and said, don't tempt God. There's a difference between what's real and what we wish would be. But sometimes we turn the supernatural into superhero. And that's not the case. Supernatural is different. You realize that the dream that Joseph had was in the supernatural, but when God effectuated that dream, it was in the physical. And all it was literally Joseph was at the bottom of the barrel working for the CEO of a company. And he rose the ranks to become the boss. That happens every day. That's literally what happened. His dream suggested that the sun and the moon and the stars are going to bow to him. But all that happened was he became the boss. So connecting dream and reality together are important because we literally live here. Like, we're alive and we live here and we have flesh and we have to live our lives, and we can't sit back and wait for God to do the supernatural, like to have the sun and the moon bow to us. I mean, the sun and the moon literally was not going to bow to Joseph. What was going to literally happen was Joseph was going to get into a position where he was going to be able to have power to feed people so they wouldn't die. I mean, that's a different story. When you take it back and understand the dream that he had, that's when it becomes supernatural. That man's life, the progression that he took, was supernatural, even though it was still natural. That natural progression happens to people all the time. People come from nothing and become something. LeBron James is a Joseph. He's not the same character, by no means, but that guy was in high school, living in the ghetto of Akron, playing basketball, and at 18 years old was in the NBA, first-round draft pick, best player in the NBA right now. I mean, he's one of the richest athletes in the world. How does that happen? It happens all the time. He doesn't have the same character. But that's a reality. So taking reality and dream and combining them and saying, okay, God, what is the purpose that you have for me in my life experience? Whatever I do, whether I'm a teacher, whether I'm pick your occupation, whatever I'm doing in life, wherever I'm at, if I'm a mom, if I'm just simply a dad, if I have no job, what is it that you have for me at this state for others to pour out? Joseph's purpose was not for himself, it was for others. And what he didn't understand was that when they bowed the sheaths, bowing the sheaths didn't mean that he would become great. It meant that he would be able to help, that he would be able to serve. He would be in a position to serve others and to pour out on other people, to ensure that their livelihood. The best thing in the world is to serve other people. I told my wife the other day, I said, a blessing, our blessings that we have, we should just spill them out on everyone we can. A blessing that isn't shared is not a blessing at all. To hoard blessing is ridiculous. I mean, it doesn't make sense. I don't want to do it. I don't want to hoard a blessing. I want to give. I feel good. There's love languages. And, we talk about them all the time. And my wife has a different one than I do. And clearly all of us have different love languages. But I love to give. Like, I do honestly feel like Superman when I give to people. I feel awesome. And it's not about being prideful or that I have this or that, but it's about, I feel great that I could give you. If somebody feels like, wow, this is great, thank you so much for giving this to us. You're so welcome. Like, it makes me feel really good. When we're out, my wife and I will be out and we'll run into people at the mall and we'll be at Starbucks and I'll pick up the Starbucks. I feel great. Let us buy you a coffee, It feels good to do that for people. My wife's always like, why are you doing that? I don't know. I feel good about it. Let's do it. I mean, it's a different way of looking at the purpose that people are putting in here. Joseph he didn't have an S on his chest. He was a real man that went through a real progression in life and was down and out and pulled himself out of the miry clay in his mind. But all along, God had him on a trajectory. What trajectory have you been on? Whether you've already been on it or whether you were there first. What trajectory have you been on? And try to put together the puzzle pieces. Okay, God, what did you do for me? I mean, just ponder. What have you really done? Go through each year of your life and what are the experiences that you were able to have? The people that you were able to meet and touch. I think that Joseph realized the impetus of these dreams and that they were motivated by God rather than the experience of his own mind. I don't think that Joseph thought this was just my own mind. I know that he knew this was God. And when dreams are truly given by God, we can trust their meaning. We can trust their purpose and ultimately rely on their fruition. However, let's not confuse it with superhero strength. I work with an attorney, one of our attorneys at work, and we were debating. I went last weekend. We were out with them, and we were debating about the leadership in politics and liberal versus conservative. And we've been having an issue at work, and he said he's going to vote conservative. He's very liberal, this guy, and he said he's going to vote conservative now. And I was clapping my hands and making jokes with him, and being funny with him. And he says to me, you know what, I still have an issue with somebody who prays to God and says they make decisions because they prayed to God and God gave them the answer. And I said, well, what does that even mean? And he goes like George Bush. George Bush came out and said that he made a decision based on what God gave him in a dream. I said, awesome. I said, The reality is that George Bush has very, very difficult decisions to make. And he's trying to search for what is right and what is wrong. And he's taking what he knows is right, his measuring stick. He's taking the measuring stick of right, and he's saying, I'm faced with this dilemma. How do I deal with it? So he goes to God, who wrote what he believed is his measuring stick, and he asks God to give him an answer. And the answer has to coincide with what he believes is his measuring stick. It's all discerning right and wrong. It's better that he's discerning right using the Bible and prayer than discerning right using, wickedness and unrighteousness. It's not to be compared to the fundamentalists who fly airplanes into buildings because they say God told them to do that. Their God never told them to do that. A man told them that their God told them to do that. So let's not confuse it. Somebody said, you'll get this, and they believed them. But this gentleman's going directly to God. He's using the Bible, and he's saying, God, what do I do? And I have to discern it based on what you have in your word. Now, the hope is that that person praying and leading has discernment. But there's nothing wrong with going to God. I told him, I said, I go to God all the time with decisions I make here. I pray about it here. We're making decisions every day that change the lives of people. We have to go to something. You're just trusting on your own gut? You think you're that good? None of us are that good. But we have to trust the purpose of their dream. We have to trust that ultimately God will bring to fruition what he has provided us. And this is why Jacob pondered the dream rather than casting them off as if they were nothing. In fact, these dreams that Joseph had became unsettling because Jacob was very well acquainted with his God, and he must have realized that God was about to shake the foundations that were around him in order to bring about his ultimate purpose. He had to have understood that these dreams are going to bring about something unsettling. Imagine Jacob. I just got here. Vayeshev, I just settled here. I just came to Canaan. I decided to retire, and now all of a sudden you're telling me we're all going to bow to this guy. That means something crazy is about to happen. In fact, these dreams could have been hope even for Jacob after Joseph was sold and accounted as dead by his brothers and family. Maybe Jacob said, Lord, you gave those dreams to Joseph, so you're going to have to do something, even raise him from the dead, because we believe them. Maybe Jacob believed that deeply. I don't know. I'm speculating. But Joseph shared what God was about to do. And as a result of sharing what God was about to do, it had to have provided some sense of security to Joseph and even to Jacob, in that Jacob believed and understood and guarded and observed the sayings that Joseph provided him. In Amos chapter 3, the Haftorah talks about a lion. It said, will a lion roar in the forest when he hath no prey? Will a lion roar in the forest when he hath no prey? Will a young lion cry out of his den if we have taken nothing? Can a bird fall in a snare upon the earth where no gin is for him? Shall one take up a snare from the earth and have taken nothing at all? Shall a trumpet be blown in a city and the people not be afraid? Shall there be evil in a city and the Lord hath not done it? Surely the Lord God will do nothing, but he revealeth his secret unto his servants, the prophets. The lion hath roared, who will not fear him? The Lord hath spoken, who can but prophesy? The verse that strikes me in this Haftorah portion is 7, where it states that God will do nothing without revealing his secrets to his prophets. So Jacob knew that God was doing something as he revealed to Joseph this vision. If God performs a work on the earth and doesn't tell his prophets beforehand in order to prepare the way for God's doing, then who ultimately receives the glory for God's work? If it's God's work on the earth and nobody was told of it, then who will receive the glory? None other but the man who performs the work. So God reveals his secrets because he will receive his glory. And before all of this stuff occurred with Joseph, he revealed his secret. So that when it came to fruition, the true glory would come. And Joseph, rightly so, gave glory to God. He says, this was not your purpose. This was God's purpose. This was not your intention. This was God's intention. You didn't sell me into slavery. God intended that you would, so that this would come about. The glory was directed in the right place. God will never receive the glory if he keeps his power to himself. He must open his mouth and reveal his secrets to all in order to be glorified and honored for his workmanship. Even Yeshua stated in Matthew chapter 10, verse 27, "What I tell you in darkness, that speak ye in light, and what ye hear in the ear, that preach ye upon the housetops." He's telling his disciples to inform the world of the secret things that he is about to reveal through his death and resurrection. To inform the world about his purpose, his mission, and position in the Godhead as the Son and Mashiach. God will reveal to his servants what he is planning for their journey and the people at large. The question is, are you hearing what God is about to do? Are you in conversation with God in order to discern the times and the signs that surround us in order to prepare the people we are called to? Are you hearing the Lion of Judah roar? Who can hold back from the sound of his mighty voice? The word says, who can withhold the message of his kingdom that is coming? Brian talked about it last week. Why are we here? Are you in the presence of God? Are you seeking? Do you know what you come here for? It's to hear the lion roar. And so when the lion's not roaring, what is it? Is there a blockage? Is there a wall, a barrier that must crumble down? What should we march around? What should the trumpet be sounded for? I mean, these are the ideas that come out in the scriptures, that when there's something keeping you from knowing, we know that God reveals his secrets, and he reveals them in parables for us to discern and decipher into reality. God speaks in parables so that we might understand the reality. He comes to us in dreams so that we might understand what's happening to us in the physical. Today's message is about the unsettling nature of living in the Spirit and not in the flesh. It is unsettling to live in the Spirit. It's not easy to live in the Spirit. People in the world and Christianity abroad will tell you that to live in the Spirit is easy. It's very difficult, especially when we're concretely grounded here on earth in the flesh. But when you live in the Spirit, God shows you things and reveals things to you that you may not understand, but he'll unravel them in the future. And that's unsettling for us, just like it was unsettling for Jacob. Just like it was unsettling for Joseph, because God revealed something to him, and it seemed as if God contradicted what he revealed. Now, why would God do that? For 10 to 15 years of Joseph's life, he was in slavery, even though he was a king. He personally felt as though he was enslaved. He was rejected. He was scorned by his own brothers. The responsibility does not come with a free pass to tranquility and peace. The responsibility of the faith and living in the Spirit does not come with a free pass. This responsibility does not allow you to simply abide, to rest, or to settle. It requires you to be shaken up. It requires you to be stirred within your spirit so that you can perform what God has called you to perform. Responsibility is not easy. I remember when I said to God that I wanted more of him and less of me when I was younger, and that meant that I would have to deny many of the things that shaped my life to that point. And after I believed I was experiencing more of God, I came to the foothills of his mountain and questioned, is this truly more of you? Is my experience, which was and is unsettling, shaken up, confusing and visionless, truly more of him? Or have I lost my way? When you're in the midst of the shaking, you feel like God's not there. When you're in the midst of the unsettlement, you feel like God has abandoned you. And you had just cried out, Lord, I want more of you, but now you feel as though you have less of him. When you're in the midst of having less of God in your mind, that's when you have him the most. And people don't understand that that's what he's doing the most. He's shaping you. It's difficult to grow beyond where you're at. I know that. It's hard to lose weight. Get on the treadmill. It doesn't feel good. Run really hard. My lungs hurt. I'm burning. I don't want to do it anymore. To get beyond the point that I'm at now takes hard work and discipline. And it takes pain. It's unsettling. It's the same thing in the spirit. Your physical life, you have to experience things that are unsettling so that your spirit may strengthen. If you don't experience the things in the physical that unsettle you, your spirit will never truly be strong. But in your weakness, he's made strong. So when you're at your weakest point, he's at his strongest point. And we don't get that. When we're the most unsettled, he's the most secure. And we don't get that. This message today, the story of Joseph, tells us exactly the relationship that God has with us. He's the anchor that brings calm to our storm. Even when we're in the midst of a storm, the waves are crashing around us, he's calmly walking on the waves. And we're fearing and sinking into the water. This we have to overcome. But God has said and is saying that in order for us to find our peace in him, we must be led by him, which requires us to place blinders on our physical eyes occasionally, so that we might restore the hope and vision that comes from seeing in the Spirit and experiencing the supernatural. I believe that people which lack faith in the world do so because they have not experienced God's outpouring and seen the miraculous. It is time to invite God into our congregation, to invite God into our lives, to perform the miraculous. I believe that this will be a place that God's faithful will be encouraged and built up by the power of the presence that is manifest in the supernatural, and each one of you will begin to experience God on a new level the very moment you simply ask God to reveal himself to you and within your life. We need a supernatural change to happen in our lives, in our congregation, and in our spiritual essence. We require that supernatural relationship with God that enables us to hear his roar and know the secrets of his kingdom, which are coming to pass. We must be the instruments and the voices that pave the way for God's work on the earth so that he receives the glory and he receives the honor. Be encouraged to seek God's face and ask him to perform in your life so that your faith might be built up and you can walk in the power of the Spirit that dwells within you. Amen. It is our duty to praise the Master of all, to ascribe greatness to the author of creation, for he made us unlike the nations of the lands and has not placed us like the families of the earth. He's not made our portion like theirs and our lot like all their multitudes. And we bend the knee and bow and acknowledge our thanks before the King over kings, the Holy One, blessed be he. He stretches out heaven and establishes earth's foundation, and the seat of his glory is in the heavens above, and the presence of his power is in the most exalted heights. He's our God, there's none other. True is our King, there's nothing beside him, as it is written in his Torah. You shall know this day and take to your heart that the Lord, he is God, in the heavens above and on the earth below. There is none other.